This is The Speaking Show. I'm David Newman, and you're tuned in to the #1 podcast for speakers, consultants, and experts who want to speak more profitably. Welcome to the Schmoozing Show. My name is Cody Lowry, and hang on. My special guest is
I'm calling my attorney
Lowry.
now.
Here he is. Cody, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you very much, David. I'm delighted to be with you today, and I'm looking forward to speaking with you as well as that broad, diverse audience you have out there.
Yes. Well, I started out just by, a little bit of a prank intro there, but I think part of schmoozing and part of making people feel comfortable is also having a little bit of fun with them. And I want to hear about your kind of professional journey, but let's just start with this concept of having fun and, warming a relationship up right from the get-go.
Well, it's funny, you should start with that. And we should tell your audience, we haven't had a meeting before this, but Nito, who wrote the foreword to my book, he's president of High Point University and founder of the National Speakers Association, just a wonderful guy. But one of the things that he mentioned in the foreword is that the book is fun, Schmooze, what they should teach at Harvard Business School. And he quotes me in the book. I said, life is short. So, make every day count, but have fun. And I do have fun. And, fortunately for me, I was born with a lampshade on my head and that doesn't hurt me. But when people review the book, David, they go, it's inspirational, it's self-help, but it's a fun read. And, you're talking to some guy who actually set up a meeting with Saturday Night Live within a 48-hour notice. So part of my past is stand-up comedy, which is maybe another whole show altogether. But schmoozing is, I'm redefining the word schmooze. Schmooze comes from the Yiddish word schmoozen, which means to chat idly in a friendly or persuasive manner, especially to have fun and, make connections. And sometimes it takes on a negative connotation. Well, I am redefining that word. And in the book, Schmooze, the sizzle is setting up a meeting with the president of the United States in 1 week, getting a baseball signed by the Pope, carrying the torch in the Olympic, being the recipient of a Super Bowl ring from one of NFL's Hall of Fame coaches. And yes, managing to audition for Saturday Night Live within a 48-hour period. But after the sizzle, and they're all in the book, I talk about building relationships and I talk about the secret sauce. And the secret sauce is, building relationships, get them to trust you and, endeavoring, if you will, to never, ever let that customer down. David, we have clients that have been with us for 30 years and they're tough. Okay. And it's not like we're going to lunch every day because this particular client is like almost 2,000 miles away. So it's about building relationships. It's about being persistent. It's about being a contrarian. Sometimes, and David, I know you sat in meetings and, you got some guy who's pontificating there and you're going, whoa, this is not the right direction, So it's about that. And then chapter 10 is kind of a smorgasbord of schmoozing tips, paying a compliment. We don't we tip people, but we don't really pay them a compliment, Hey, Joe, that was the best service I ever had. Say that to a waiter or, a waitress, and they light up like a Christmas tree, right? It's about building your brand. And we all have a brand, and some people don't even know that. And so I talk about that. But you will like chapter 8 because I talk about schmoozing from the podium. And I talk about my experiences, how I closed a multi-million-dollar deal with a national multi-billion-dollar agency. I shouldn't even have been in the same room, but it happened. And it was because I was trained early on to, get up in front of people. And incidentally, and this is in the book, I actually, how I started out? I started out speaking to people when I was 11 years old and I sold newspapers at the Sunrise Shopping Center. I would pitch the Miami News. My competitor was the Miami Herald. And I'd say, paper, sir, paper, ma'am, Miami News, Blue Street Edition, And most of the people would walk on by. They weren't interested in the Blue Street Edition. Then I'd stop them. I'd say, would you buy a paper if I told you where you got your shoes, what state you were born in, and how many birthdays you've had? When you're 11 years old, you can get away with that, right? So they turn around, they'd look, and I'd say, you got your shoes on your feet. You were born in the state of infancy, and you've only had one birthday the day you were born. So I started really pitching and getting in front of people at an early age. But yeah, schmoozing from the podium and how very important it is for us to encourage our children and our grandchildren to, get up and get up in front. I have three millennials, and I am proud to say all of them can get up in front of a group of people and, hold their attention and, share with them whatever it is. So the book is jam-packed with helpful information for almost every age.
Totally amazing. Let's talk a little bit about your backstory and kind of how you came to the work that you're doing today, and what were some interesting milestones along your professional journey, just in the advertising business and other adventures that you've had professionally before launching Schmooze and before your speaking business that you have today.
Let's start out where I think your question starts, and that's when I graduated from college. And incidentally, I didn't have a father or mother was writing checks, so I worked my way through school, college, and I finished in 4 years. I drove a Corvair that used more oil than gasoline. My major was advertising and public relations, but I couldn't find anybody that wanted to pay me $14,000 a year. It just wasn't going to happen, right? So my younger brother was in the automobile business down in South Florida. I was in Tampa, home of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, by the way. So I was in Tampa, and he calls me up, and he knew I was struggling. And he says, why don't you try selling cars? I said, are you nuts? I'm not selling cars. That's not going to be my career. And it was very distasteful to him. I almost didn't talk to him again. No. But in any event, I was really searching, couldn't find anything. And then he said something that really got my attention. He said, you get a demo. I said, what's a demo? He said, well, it's a brand new car. A brand new car? He says, yeah, you get to have a demo to use. Well, that's all I needed, right? And so I got an opportunity to interview for a couple of stores. And then there was this one store that I decided I was definitely going to work at. It was a brand new Chevrolet store. And I went down to Penny's, and with the last, few dollars I had, I bought a pair of baby blue pants, a white shirt and a paisley tie. I didn't have a big budget, but driving around looking at these car people, they were pretty flashy dressers, and I didn't want to get outdone. So I get there, and they send me down to the general manager's office. And you know how you walk in a room and sometimes you just, the chemistry isn't there. The chemistry was definitely not there for me. And I said, Mr. Vanderbo, I said, my name's Cody Lowry. I just graduated from the University of South Florida, and I want to make the automotive business my career. I've thought about it a lot, and I'm going on and, doing whatever I can. So he immediately interrupts me, and he says, why don't you come on back in about 3 or 4 months? He said, we already hired, several people. We just don't have a position for you right now. And I couldn't believe I was hearing what he was saying. He didn't want me, Cody Lowry. And I got up and I said, sir, you just made a big mistake, because you don't have anybody out there on that sales floor that I can't outsell. And I said, see you later. And so off I went. But a gentleman came running down the ramp. He was actually sitting in the office. His name was Manny Fernandez, and he was the truck manager. He had a glass eye. Looks like something out of the Star Wars movies, right? So he comes up to me. He says, Cody, I ain't never heard anybody talk to Bucky that way. And I said, well, Bucky just made a big mistake. He said, listen, why don't you do this? He said, why don't you call me back later on today? Let me see what I could do. And I'm going to make this short. So I called him back. He said, Cody, you start in the morning. I said, you're kidding. He said, no, start in the morning. I'll see you there. So I get there the next morning, same baby blue pants, same white shirt, didn't have a big wardrobe. He doesn't come on till 12. He's the truck manager. So now they said, Mr. Vanderbo is waiting for you. So I go into Mr. Vanderbo's office, and I'm, really excited, and I'm sure he'll be just as excited to see me. And he's got his head buried in paperwork. Good morning, Mr. Vanderbo. Doesn't say a word. I sit down in his chair in front of him, and 5 minutes goes by, 10 minutes goes by, and I thought, well, I'm going to break the ice. I said, Mr. Vanderbo, I said, do you have a training program? Now he starts smiling from ear to ear. You see, I'll let you in on a little secret. He and Manny had a bet on me. He was definitely going to hire me, but he thought I would fail miserably. And Manny, he thought I would succeed. So he said, let me ask you a question. He said, can you figure out 4% sales tax? I said, yeah, I think I can figure that out. He said, well, then get out on the point. Now, David, I didn't know where the point was, but I knew it wasn't in his office, right? So off I went. Make a long story short, they hired me the first month, sold 27 units, and I was salesman of the month, and I was Bucky's best friend. As good as I did in the automobile business, I knew that's not where my career was taking me. And I went off and I did stand-up comedy, and that's an interesting hour-long deal. And then I had a dealer in Lakeland, Florida that wanted to put me in my own dealership. And I got over there and he wasn't funded very well. And it was just chasing money every day, So I came home one day and I said to my wife, I said, well, I made a decision today. She said, what's that? I said, I'm going to get into the advertising business. She said, oh, who are you going to work for? And I said, me, who else? And so I got into the advertising business. First account I picked up was a Chevrolet store who knew me well. Next thing I know, I've got 5 or 6 associations. And associations is what we call tier 2. You represent a group of dealers in a market. And then 1993, Toyota comes knocking. And we pick up this account, and we got it from a very big agency.
So you literally, let me just go back one quick thing, just so people are absolutely tuned in here and listening. You went from selling cars to starting your own agency from square zero.
Yep.
So at that point, like the very first client, that very first dealership, even before the associations, even before Toyota, where we'll pick up the story, I mean, what experience did you have? What did you offer them? How did you even know how to sell it?
Well, I had the schmooze. Don't forget about that. But no, that was my major. And then I skipped a little part there. I was a general sales manager at a large Chevrolet store. And I did all the TV and radio and marketing. And I was the on-air talent. I was Fabulous Filbert. Fabulous Filbert, friends. Yes, not to be able to, and it was kind of a funny shtick. So that's pretty much how it happened. And I'll tell you a funny story. I opened up and my office was probably, 500 square feet, really big, right? I'm the only person. And there's a big sporting good chain. And some of your people might remember it was called Sports Unlimited. And then they went around the country and it was Charlotte Sports and it was Phoenix Sports and Tampa Sports and what have you. So they were looking for an agency and somehow I got on the list, right? And there's a date for presentations and I go in there, nobody's pitching TV. They're pitching, back when newspaper was a viable media, they were pitching newspaper and radio and what have you. So I was the only one that was pitching television and I had, storyboards and what have you. I was a one-man band though. I got up in front of all of them and the other agencies are walking in with their media people and their, little gifts to go, for the dealers and what have you. I get a call from a guy, maybe he's listening out there now. He's Ted Hageman, really a wonderful guy. And he called me up and he said, well, you're one of the finalists and we would like to come by and visit your facilities. And I went, hubbada, 500 square feet, right? Only me. Here they come. There's 4 of them and they were all athletes, right? And so they're much bigger than me. They walk in and they almost can't stand in the lobby. There's almost not enough room. But I went over my pitch again and I got to know them. And it's about building relationships. And a lot of times, David, people think it takes, weeks or months or years to build a relationship, but we need to build these relationships in the first 30 seconds because people are already making a value judgment on us, whether they want to do business or they don't want to do business. And they were all my best buddies when they left. And sure enough, we beat some big local and regional Florida agencies. They said, Cody, you won the business. And that was quite an accomplishment. And everybody talked about it and they put it in, the newspaper and what have you. So I moved on from there. I got into, really doing more of the automotive. And as I said, we had 12 marketing Toyota associations around the country. And I don't know how much time we have, but that's a great story, what happened there.
Hey, this interview is a real moneymaker. If you're serious about ramping up your reach and revenue as a speaker, trainer, or expert, book a confidential speaker strategy call with our team. The link is doitmarketing.com/call. It will be the most valuable 45 minutes you invest in your speaking-driven business. Speaking of value, let's get back to the show. Tell us a little bit, because now we're obviously in this kind of post-pandemic, hybrid, virtual, distributed world. Schmooze is important. Schmooze was always important. Schmooze will always be important. What are your tips for some digital schmoozing? How do we schmooze on Zoom? How do we build relationships where we can't necessarily be belly to belly? We can't be having breakfast and lunch and coffee. We can't be as much in person as we used to be. Give us the lowdown on digital schmooze.
Yeah, and I think that's a great question, although I do think it's coming back. The CBS affiliate in Dallas had me on about 3 weeks ago, and they wanted me to segue from the book into, talking to people that are interviewing for jobs on vis-a-vis Schmooze or whatever it is, Skype or whatever it is. And, a lot of the same things are important on a Zoom as they are if you're sitting across from one. Number one, know that person who is interviewing you, whether they're the CEO or, HR, whoever's doing it, know them. And when I say know them, I mean, when I go into a meeting, I didn't do a lot of homework on you, David, but let's just say that you were interviewing me. I would know what college you went to. I would know the charities you belong to. I know how many kids you have. I know what clubs you went to. I would have as much knowledge on you as I possibly could. So when I went into that meeting, if there was a common denominator that I could play off, oh, you went to Cornell. Do you know my uncle was a graduate there and blah, blah. You know what I'm saying? And so you try to, get people out of their boom, 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 strategy, if you will. And so number one, know the person. Obviously, you got to know the company. You got to know what they do. You got to speak intelligently about that. And many of people have not gotten the job because they walked into an interview completely oblivious to, really what was important to that company. I think it's really important. Somebody said, actually, it was Botany Suits. Botany Suits, they had a tagline, you never get a second chance to make a first impression, right? As president of an agency, I've interviewed a lot of people, and sometimes the attire, especially today, is, I don't think it's appropriate. And if I don't think it's appropriate, I think some other people may not think it's appropriate. So I think you have to remember that you don't know that person that, that's interviewing you. So try to dress the part. I'm not saying you have to put on a tie. I've actually stopped wearing a tie over the years. I used to always have a tie. It's the first thing I'd put on in the morning and then kind of dress around it, right? So, so dress the part, and it comes through on a Zoom or in person, and be genuine, be real. And as Howard Cosell one time once said, tell it like it is,
Well, it's funny that you talk about being well dressed because, our mutual friend, Dr. Nito, this guy, he goes to sleep in a suit.
Yeah.
And perfectly pressed, crisp, white shirt. He has these amazing neckties. He probably takes a shower wearing the necktie.
He's an incredible dresser.
He really is. If we find his tailor, we can definitely schmooze him up.
Absolutely.
What's the fun backstory of how you and Nito came to know each other?
So that's interesting. When I left the automobile business, and got in the advertising business, I also wanted to do speaking. So I joined the National Speakers Association. But right before I went to my first meeting, I think it was out in Arizona, I went to the International Platform Association in Washington, D.C. And Nito was there. And this goes back 77. I mean, it goes way back, right? And Nito was on deck, and I hadn't really met him yet. He got up and he spoke, and he's an amazing guy. I almost couldn't understand him for the people out there who've never met Nito. He has some broken English today, but back then, recent immigrant from Lebanon and carried with it a real heavy accent, Nito knows I do an impression. Oh, but I must tell you, this is something that is very, very important to me. And David, how are you? It is so nice to see you again. Do you have the money you owe me? So.
That is an excellent, excellent Nito impression. For folks that don't know, that is spot on.
Yeah. Wait till you hear my Richard Nixon. So anyway, he was there. I was there. There was another guy, unfortunately, Robert Henry, who was from Auburn, Alabama, and a humorist. Did you know Robert?
Well, I know Patrick, of course.
Oh, okay. Yeah. And I met Patrick when he was a little boy. In any event, we became, the three amigos. And we picked up a client about 25 years ago in his hometown of High Point. They call that the Triad. It's High Point, Greensboro, and Winston-Salem. And then I got to spend some more time with Nito. And I will tell you a real funny story because I think your speakers will appreciate that. Nito calls me up and he says, Cody, he says, will you be available to speak to our Rotary? It's going to be in October. And he gives me the date and he gives me all of this stuff. And he puts me down. And this is like 4 months in advance, a week. I mean, I've got the plane ticket. I got everything. I'm going to go. And this particular Rotary, it's High Point, North Carolina. I mean, this is a Rotary where the men invite their wives and they all come in dressed up. You'd think they're at church or something like that. So it's kind of a big deal. And, I think about, 150 people or something. So he calls me. He says, Cody, he says, would you do me a favor? Would you let me rebook you? And I said, sure, absolutely. What happened? He said, well, I have an opportunity and the date is open for Norman Vincent Peale. And I said, who's he? No, I didn't say that. Norman Vincent Peale. So yeah, I got the hook from Norman Vincent Peale, which I was honored, right? And so, that's how I met Nito, and just an incredible guy, and the things that he's doing in High Point are amazing.
Super quick commercial break. Isn't this interview amazing? If you'd like to get more ideas on how to start or grow your speaking business fast, pop over to our free training at doitmarketing.com/webinar. Let's give folks a little bit more of the schmooze philosophy. I know that and you mentioned that you're redefining schmooze because, of course, some people might have a negative connotation that's
right.
Pushy, that's salesy, that's like the worst kind of networking. And really, it's the best kind of networking and it's the best kind of relationship building. But I know that one of the elements that you speak on and that you talk about in the book is persistence. I talk about this when we talk about marketing and sales. I tell people that you always need to show up like a happy, squeaky wheel. Right. What's your definition of persistence and what are some of the schmooze philosophies around persistence?
I think persistence is a common denominator, not just with me, you presumably, real great leaders. I mean, it's all part of their repertoire. And you have to be, if you're going to, win the day. And for me, I think because of my early childhood, I was like the Artful Dodger and I had to be persistent and I was always hustling. So it became part of who I was. And, one of the chapters in the book is, and I'll kind of segue this, it's chutzpah. And you got to be careful with chutzpah because too much chutzpah is not good, but you got to know when to use it and when to pull back. And as far as persistence, I mean, I've got story after story of how I was persistent. If you will indulge me, I'd like to tell you a little bit about Saturday Night Live.
Yes, please do.
I was doing my stand-up comedy routine. And my wife and I were all ready to go to Las Vegas. And I'd done some gigs around Florida and here and there, but I just felt my audience was Las Vegas. So anyway, I decided, and I didn't have a lot of money at the time, but I did decide that I wanted to take about 5 or 6 days and go to New York and, just check it out. So I went up there, stayed at the YMCA, really a classy joint. I stayed at the YMCA by the United Nations, and that was a little scary at times. But in any event, I got out and I went to the Improv my first night in town. And it was a pretty sophisticated comedic group. And I thought, well, I'll just go and I'll get on. And, I kind of backed off a little bit. But the next night I went to Catch a Rising Star. And that was the #1 comedy club in the country. And every iconic comedian, that you can think of right now, they went through, Catch a Rising Star. I will let you in on a little secret. I probably didn't have any business being there at that time. I mean, I'd only been doing this 6 months. I really hadn't paid my dues. I had raw talent. I knew that. And I knew that I could do impressions as well as Rich Little, but whether or not I belonged at Catch a Rising Star, I just didn't know. But anyway, I went there that night and the guy behind the bar, I told him who I was, Cody Lowry from Tampa, Florida, and I'd love an opportunity to get on. There was like a line of comedians. And he said, you know what, I'm going to put you on. So he put me on. I waited about an hour and a half and I was the next guy up. And they stopped me. They said, hey, listen, Tom Dreesen is in the house. He's going on The Tonight Show. And we got to let him get on. He's got some new material that he wants to try out. I don't know if you know Tom Dreesen, wonderful comedian. He was on the Tonight Show 1,000 times, opened for Frank Sinatra 1,000 times, But anyway, they introduced him. He goes out and the audience knows him. And it happens to all of us. And for me sitting in the wings, it was very uncomfortable because he got up there and he bombed. And he got maybe halfway through his new material and he put the microphone back in the stand. And he said, I apologize for tonight. He said, I'm going to be on the Tonight Show tomorrow night and I'm going to go and get some new material. So he left. They gave him one of these. And the guy goes, you're on from Tampa, Florida, blah, 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 Cody Lowry. And I'm kind of an aggressive guy, and I get out there and I really, really did well. I mean, I didn't, the agents weren't standing in the wings ready to sign me up, but I felt so good about it that the next morning I came up with an idea that was crazy. While you're in town, why don't you audition for Saturday Night Live? Like, while you're in town, why don't you have your nails done? Or why don't you get a haircut? Or why don't you go to that restaurant? But audition for Saturday Night Live? So I pick up the phone and I call Saturday Night Live, Rockefeller Center. And the guy's name that was in charge of creative or talent, his name was John Head. He was an English chap. In any event, I asked for John Head and they put me through. And I said, Mr. Head, my name is Cody Lowry. And I told him why I was up here. I was only up here for about, another 2 days. And then I had to get back to Florida, but that I did Jimmy Carter and who knows, he might become president if he does, And I didn't know that he was kind of trying to blow me off. He says, well, I'm busy right now. Why don't you give me a call tomorrow? And I said, okay, what time? He said, well, just call anytime. Okay. Well, I called once. I called twice. He talked about persistence. I called 3, I called 4 times. And I can't get him back on the phone, right? So back then, before the advent of our cell phones, and the tracking that we have, you used a regular phone and you used information. And I called information for a John Head in New York City. And guess what happened, David? John Head had a listed number. And that night I called him. I say that night, it was around 6:30. And he answers the phone. I could tell by the accent. I said, Mr. Head, this is Cody Lowry. And I'm so excited. And I'm sure he wasn't nearly as excited. He goes, you are unbelievable. He said, and I don't think he used the word persistence, but he commented on my staying with it. And we set up a meeting for 2:00 the next day. Now, I got to tell you, all this confidence and, I was really naive and I was going up those elevators and my mouth, I got cotton mouth. I was so scared. I go, what are you doing? You don't belong here. And so I get up, I get out into the waiting room and all of a sudden there's this calmness that comes over me. I'm looking at Bellucci on the wall and I'm looking, Gilda Radner and I'm looking, and I'm starting to feel a little cocky again, like this is where I belong, and I'm getting this confidence back up. So she ushers me into a room and they didn't have really a stage. They had a platform and John comes in and just a wonderful guy. I hope he's still with us today, but I start going through my routine and one of my routines was a fast cell vasectomy for $14.95. And it always won over the college kids, right? And, I did a lot of impersonations. And then when I did Jimmy Carter, my name is Jimmy Carter. Always tell the truth. If I ever tell a lie, I go on the tooth. And a lot of people think I'm prejudiced, come from the South. I want the American people to understand one thing right now. Of my 4 children, 2 of them are black, and it went on and on. And he laughed and he said, hold it right there. And he went out and he got 2 other gentlemen. He said, Cody, do the Jimmy Carter. So I did my Jimmy Carter. And I don't think at the time anyone, including Little, was doing Jimmy Carter. But anyway, I did my Jimmy Carter and they got out and said, very good. I was never formally introduced to him. And off they went. He said, Cody, listen, he said, I'm going to catch you around town. Let's see if he becomes president. As you recall, he was running against Gerald Ford and looked like he had my name is Jimmy Carter and I'm running for president. So it looked like he had an opportunity to actually win this thing. And he said, I'll try to catch you around town. Well, he didn't remember what I told him on the front end that, I was only up here for like 2 days. So I went back to Florida, got in the automobile business, which later took me into the advertising business. And Rich Little became king. No, he's a
There
talent
you
guy.
go.
He would have done it anyway, sir.
Well, so now that you mentioned that you have this fantastic series of, is it impressions or impersonations? What's the
I think you can
preferred
use
term?
either one. I
Okay.
answer to both.
So give me three more of your favorites that you really enjoy doing.
Richard Nixon.
I'm ready.
When the strongest nation in the world can't manage its own economy. When the nation with the highest tradition for the rule of law is plagued by unprecedented lawlessness. And when the president cannot travel to or abroad to any foreign nation without fear of hostile demonstration, then I say it's time for new leadership for the American people. That's by Richard Nixon. And that won me over a lot of things. I will tell you, the first paid gig I ever did, David, it's a Serena hotel and it's an enclave for the wealthy people from the Northeast to come down in the winter. And it's very hoity-toity and very expensive. And this agent sets me up at this hotel and there's going to be a lot of entertainers and blah, blah, blah. And so it's a formal affair. I didn't know it's a formal affair, right? I get there and I got on this sport coat that looks like maybe Pinky Lee would have bought it, and she comes out like Corella DeVille, right? She comes out, she goes, "Where's your tuxedo?" At that, and I said, I didn't know it was formal. I started to tell her, David, that, the laundry has lost it now twice, but I didn't think she was, in the mood for any humor.
Right.
And she just walks away, and so I walked down into the hotel, and there it was, a great big marquee with appearing tonight, Cody Lowry, comedian and impressionist. And I'm going, yeah. What about the magic guy? He didn't show. What about the dancing dogs? So I've got this thing alone, and I'm standing out in front, and the MC comes out. He plays, in the orchestra behind. They had an orchestra. He also acts as the MC, and he's kind of giving me the lay down. And I must tell you, I love the older generation, and I'm getting there faster than I want to be. But these people were in their 80s. And now they're coming into the ballroom and they're all in their formal attire. And there's several walkers, that are coming in. And I'm going, this isn't my audience. This is not my group. And the MC, he says, don't worry. He says, just speak up. I said, yeah, no kidding. So in any event, I got up there and I told you earlier that I did this, and it's a great story. I won't get into it now, but it's this whole deal on fast cell vasectomy. So I get up and I start doing my fast cell. Are you tired of using those same old contraceptive measures? The ones that are so tiresome, burdensome, usually carry with it some degree of risk. Well, what's a frustrated couple to do? Why not do what so many Americans are doing now and turn to that one sure way to rid yourself of those pesky little creatures? Vasectomy. Yes, friends, vasectomy. At least so it goes on. David, when I said vasectomy, you would have thought I said a 4-letter word. The ladies are putting did he just say vasectomy?
Yeah.
And they got their hands over their ears. And I'm going, oh my God. The MC comes up behind me. He goes, I think you better leave. And I go,
oh no.
Crazy? And so you talk about impressions. I brought him back with my John F. Kennedy. In the long history of the world, few generations have been granted the role of defending freedom in its hour of maximum danger. I do not shrink from that responsibility, but rather I welcome it. I don't believe that any of us would have lived at any other time or any other generation. And then I was a hero,
You got to know the crowd, right? You got to know your audience.
You absolutely. And I learned, right? And we're always learning. We learn every day. I always tell people, when you're green, you're growing. When you're ripe, you rot. But in the book, I talk about never, ever, ever wing it. And I never do. I mean, I could go over material that I know. I could recite it backwards, right? I go over it.
Totally fantastic. Well, Cody Lowry, it's been so fantastic to have you. The book is Schmooze. Tell people, how can they get connected and stay connected to more Cody Lowry brilliance? Website, social media, where can we send people for more of you?
I don't have anything.
You got nothing.
I'm kidding. No, the book is called Schmooze. You got to keep a straight face in comedy, right? Schmooze, What They Should Teach at Harvard Business School. And you can get the book, Barnes & Noble or Amazon or what have you. It's on audio. I did the audio. I had a fight to do the audio, believe it or not. They didn't want me to do the audio, but we managed to get through that. You can go to mrschmooze.com. My email is myschmooze@gmail.com. And I can tell you my next book, and I'm already writing it, it's about schmoozers we love. And so if anybody out there knows a schmoozer in your life, maybe it's a clergy, maybe it's a Uncle Joe, maybe it's whoever. But first and foremost, and we really didn't get into that. I wish we would have, but the schmoozer's got to have heart and they got to understand the little guy and kind of help them out along the way.
Yes, 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 and amen. Well, Cody, so great to have you.
It was great meeting you.
Thank you for sharing your brilliance. I'm looking forward to the whole series. I want to read Schmooze. I want to read Booze. I want to read Snooze. I want to read all of them.
Don't read Lose.
Exactly. Great to have you on.
Hey, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Well, that wraps up another episode of The Speaking Show. Hey, tell you what, if you like us, rate us and review us on iTunes. Subscribe. Tell a friend. Go grab the notes and downloads and extras at thespeakingshow.com. See you next time.